Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bread Theory. I am your host, Zach, and tonight we're going to be diving into the world of permaculture yet again, continuing on in our Permaculture 101 series, getting you up to speed on the very wide world of permaculture. We're going to be looking at some no-till methods tonight, things like sheet mulching, like chop and drop, and things like using a worm tower or a food barrel sort of an arrangement. Should be some fun stuff. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I always try to keep up with the questions that are coming in. I'm going to go ahead and copy the link for the video that we're going to start with. It's going to be one from Matt Powers, who is going to be teaching us about sheet mulching, which you can do on any. This is especially important sort of technique to know if you are in potentially contaminated soils, if you are lacking any sort of good soil in any way. It could be hard packed. I mean, you can literally even do this on concrete. In fact, I think part of the book Paradise Lot by Eric Tonesmeyer and David Jackie, I believe part of it, they were talking about how they literally just sheet mulched their driveway, and it worked. I mean, it worked on top of asphalt, an asphalt driveway. So this can be a very powerful technique if you find yourself in a space that doesn't have really good fertile soil. But it can be good for anybody. You know, it's a way to incorporate actively composting stuff right into your garden, so you can get rid of a lot of waste like grass clippings. That's usually one of the layers. Another name for it usually is lasagna gardening, because you kind of layer things up, as you'll see. And it can be good for anybody, really. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up right now. Get a bit larger view for myself there, so you can see what's going on with me. Let's full screen. Oh, wait. I don't think that was the right one. 1 second. Okay, we do have full screen on that. That's good. I want to make sure to turn on the closed captioning for those following along that way. It also helps me too, just to read along as I listen to what he's, talking about. But I guess without any further ado, let's get into it and learn about sheet mulching.
Sheet mulching has been a thing that people have been recommending and doing on all climates all over the place for a long time. But sheet composting is a totally different thing.
Oh, okay.
And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be doing a very selective, very high level sheet composting in place, in situ. So this area is currently, it's already a daikon radish, which is a fertilizing cover crop. It gathers nitrogen in. It is actually a biological tillage. So it's already happening. It's already good. But now we're going to chop and drop in place, but not the whole thing. We're going to be actually mulching it in place. You're going to see how. And then we're going to be adding in comfrey, which is like, oh man, comfrey is amazing. If you don't know about
Comfrey's a great plant.
then you should really check it out. People are using it as a compost starter, just like you would use manure.
So there's a few cool things about comfrey to know about. For one thing, it's really easy to propagate. It puts out these really thick roots, and you basically just break them apart. As long as you have, like, I think an inch or two long root spike, it will regenerate an entire plant from it. Depending on the species, it's not even self-seeding. It's just kind of clumping, so it'll just form a nice little clump. You have to look out to make sure you have the right species for that one, because some of them do go to seed and can spread quite a lot. But the main qualities of them are that because they have this really thick taproot that they send way down into the ground, they pull up all sorts of nutrients that are unavailable to much more shallow rooted plants. And the way you can get those nutrients to your plants is, 2 or 3 times a year, you just come by and you chop down the whole plant. And the interesting thing about the leaves of a comfrey is it has virtually no fiber. So it will break down really quick. That's why he was talking about how they use it as a compost starter, because it really kicks things off very quickly. The microbes love it. They're more than happy to break it down, and it'll just shoot back up. You know, so you can. That's why you can do it 2, 3 times in a single season. I had some planted at a house I lived at, and managed to move it around to different parts of the yard, and it's still going strong. And also, it provides a little bit of pollinator friendly stuff. I think it flowers, I think, just once a year. Not terribly showy flowers, but it's something. You can also use it, I believe, for feed. I don't know which animals do best with that, so definitely look that up before you try it. But it's a pretty versatile plant. It also can be used as a border crop because it puts down those really thick tap roots and it tends to really bunch up really tightly. It can even keep out some of the plants that would otherwise, go, horizontally through the soil. Things like grasses or even like a creeping Charlie, I'm sure it would hold out. So it can be used in that capacity as well. It's a really cool plant to check out. Comfrey. That's Comfrey.
So just think about that, the compostability there, the heat there. We're going to be adding that on top of this. So this is already nitrogenous. We're adding something on top of it that's like manure. And then we're going to be adding biochar, right? And then we're going to, on top of all of that, we're going to be adding the compost. And then we're going to be seeding right into it. So this is an area we've prepared. This had all this daikon radish that resprouted the following, this early spring, this winter. And now we're going to make it into sheet composting. So different from sheet mulching, we're not getting out the cardboard, we're not getting out trash, we're not getting out paper and doing the whole layering thing and measuring. No. We're just going to be creating a compost in layers, in sheets here.
So he's making this distinction, but I'm not really seeing what it is. Usually what he was talking about with the cardboard, he's calling it trash. I don't know why. Cardboard has a little bit of binding agent to it, but that breaks down pretty quickly in the soil. As long as you're removing all the plastic, like the tape and stuff from it, you can use brown cardboard just fine. It's not going to hurt your plants. That usually is the bottom layer of a sheet mulching pile. The reason being that it's very hard for stuff to sprout up through it. So if you need to smother something like a grass, or virtually any sort of thing that's aggressive that will come up, it's going to act. It acts the same way that a very thick layer of leaves would. So it all mats together. It retains some of that moisture in the soil, keeps it from seeping through. I don't know really what his problem with that is. I thought that was going to be more of a sheet mulching. I guess I didn't look at the title too closely. But it sounds like he's doing basically the same thing, where the entire idea is to layer up things in a way that each layer benefits the one next to it. So, a real easy way to do that would be like we learned earlier in earlier videos, previous streams, where, you want to balance your brown, your dry dead stuff with your green, your freshly cut green material. The green acts like the match, and the brown acts like the log on the fire. It burns the longest. So you need both to keep things going. You need both to heat up the compost, if that's what you're going for. But yeah, the idea is to layer things in a way that complement one another. Let's continue though.
Sheet mulching is something that needs to be upgraded to be sheet composting. So if you're excited about this, if you're a little bit enthusiastic about this, then you're going to want to try this. So let's do this right now. You guys ready? Let's go. So you could use a knife, or you could get in there with something like this and just take things down to the ground level. So that is now turned immediately into mulch. And this tool is absolutely incredible. So this is a Ryobi cordless hedge trimmer. It's got a lithium battery, it charges up really fast, and it does work amazingly well. So thanks to Tesla, thanks to those lithium battery innovations that we've seen coming out of those companies, we now have power tools that are really incredibly powerful that are not gas powered.
I don't know if that's thanks to Tesla. I don't know what that comment was about. Lithium batteries have been around for quite some time. That's what's, I mean, as long as there's been laptops, they've been using lithium batteries. In fact, Tesla, I don't know if they still do it this way, but the original way that they would configure things was they would have basically a bunch of laptop batteries and they would set them up in, circuits of batteries, all one after another. So it's not necessarily thanks to Tesla. I don't think they've had that big an impact yet on turning lithium into batteries, into long-lasting batteries. It's important to note here, he says, well, you could use a knife or you could use this thing. And permaculture shouldn't be prescriptive, or at least it shouldn't be prescriptive in a way that says one size fits all. So there are going to be times when you do need a power tool, when it's perfectly fine to use a power tool to get done what you need to get done. If you have a large space that you're managing by yourself or with few people, and the only way to get everything done is to use a power tool. If you're dealing with particularly difficult stuff, say you want to do something like earthworks, even something that you're going to use, reconfigure one time and then use for potentially generations, then it makes sense to use power equipment, even like, diggers and backhoes, things like that, to set in place things that will last for a long time. If you're just doing this casually, if like this is just your home garden, and it's either a knife, which might take a little bit longer, or a power tool, I would go with the knife. At least try it out. See if it's too much work for you to manage. Because the thing is, once you're reliant on the power tool, you're reliant on a lot of complex moving parts that eventually are going to break down. Eventually, that battery will wear out. You're making yourself, I don't want to say beholden, but dependent on a whole lot of machinery from that point on. If you're starting your design in a way that requires that level of intervention constantly, in a permaculture setting, you're probably doing something wrong. Or at least there's probably a better way to design it to require less work. Because remember, the goal of permaculture is to do a lot of work up front to get things set up. That's things like earthworks, like big things. Setting your homestead if you're out on the land. Putting up water pumps if that's something you need. Big stuff gets set up ahead of time, and you start planting the trees that will be mature in 20 to 30 years. You start making these changes that you're not going to see any return on for a while. So you're doing all this work ahead of time at the front end. But the point is to eventually pull back and become less and less of a force within that ecosystem. If you set things up right the first time, or if you just tweak little bits here and there as you go, and you're, being more a hand on the landscape rather than a footprint on it, you're not just bashing down, beating back, slashing, destroying. You're instead guiding, facilitating, trying to assemble the right parts that will work together. If that's your goal instead, the idea is that you end up with a better more sustainable system, then you have to do less work on year after year. Because imagine if you had to rely on a tool, even that small, just an electric trimmer. If you had to rely on that, then oh, I guess it's just as I've said, you're going to have to rely on that probably for the duration of your time on that land. You're creating a dependency that you don't necessarily have to make. So you always have to be very careful when choosing what tools to use. There are going to be times, like I said, when those are appropriate tools to use. But there are also times when it's not appropriate, when you're just choosing the easy way in the short term over the easy way in the long term. So yeah, just keep that in mind when you're deciding what tools to use. Most of the time, the things you're going to be doing, especially once you get into once your land is established, once your ecosystem is established, basically, it should be less and less intervention. You should need, smaller and smaller tools with less and less impact in order to keep things going. And the ultimate goal would be something like, if you need to keep an area clear rather than using any sort of tools on it, you would graze it. You would perhaps burn it once in a while. There's certain ecosystems that do benefit from burning, like prairie grass. Like the tall grass prairies tend to benefit from that. Even woodlands benefit sometimes from having the understory burned. But not necessarily going out and cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting. That's going to make more work for yourself. And that should be the opposite of the goal, right?
We're moving on actually now from lithium to zinc and other different more common metals to make these out of, and people are starting to recycle these. So there's hope for these not to be a terrible toxin out there. And if it's solar powered, charged up, I mean, you're off the grid and it's all good. So I just wanted to show you up.
You're still dependent on mining for lithium. And, if you have metal tools, you're dependent in a certain degree on mining for those metals. It's just that iron and the components that go into making steel are a lot more common than lithium, and tend to have less of an impact on the environment overall. And especially if you're just using, like you said, one small knife. And the kind of knife that I like for this sort of thing is it's a hook. I'll have to find a good link to what I'm talking about. But basically, it looks kind of like a sickle. It's about the same size, got a curved blade. But instead of being smooth, instead of, what you would use to chop down wheat and that sort of thing, it's serrated. So it has serrations all along the inside. And you basically just grab a bunch of whatever you're trying to chop. You use a quick few slices back and forth, and that's it. And that's a lot less metal to rely on than that entire piece of machinery that he's holding. So even the metal that goes into making the machinery itself, or assembling that machine, that needs to be taken into account too. So he's saying, oh, you get solar panels, you get off grid, oh, it's all good. Well, those things, there are trade-offs with everything. Even having a solar panel, you have to do some maintenance of it. You have to protect it from hailstorms. You have to protect it from wind. They don't last forever. They last a very long time because there's virtually no moving parts in a solar panel. There's not a lot that can break. But they do wear down with time. They're not as efficient over time. And yeah, so I don't know. I just something about the way he says everything is all good and, oh, you don't have to worry about this, don't have to worry about that. It seems to lack a little bit of forethought that I think is really integral in permaculture planning. So I'm not too impressed with this video so far, I gotta say. But we'll see where he goes from here.
Close what I'm doing.
That's funny. The closed captioning registers that as applause. No, that's down to the machine. Um, and the way he's doing it too, I don't quite understand. We'll see in the next video when we get more into chop and drop, which is essentially what he's doing. With the chop and drop technique, you want to go from the bottom and then you just throw it down. He's slicing back and forth and getting a little nip of this, a little nip of that. I don't know what the purpose of cutting it up that much is. I don't think it ends up breaking down any better doing it that way. And you're certainly using a lot more effort and a lot more electricity to do it that way. So that would not be my technique. In fact, with the amount of time that he's taking just to do this small patch, you could go in, grab a bunch, slice, grab a bunch, slice, grab a bunch, slice with that knife that he eschewed at the beginning. Um, so yeah, I'm not quite sure where he's going with this. We'll see. Okay. I think that's comfort that he's digging up. I should be muting this too because this music is probably gonna get me in trouble later on. But ugh, this, I mean, this looks like a lot of effort for what he's getting out of it. I can't see how he's really saving anything with that machine. Okay, let's unmute again.
Section for pollinators and for seed. And as you can see, there's tons of pollinators in there right now.
What he's doing now is he's putting down it's called biochar. Basically, if you create charcoal, there's fairly easy ways to do it. Charcoal forms when you're burning a lot of woody material in a low oxygen environment. And instead of the material getting, burnt up into smoke, it chars. It turns into essentially charcoal. And there's some differences of opinion about how effective and useful biochar is. Some consider it a way to lock away carbon from the atmosphere for a long time, which probably has some merit to it. You probably are, I mean, in its form, biochar is pretty stable. And that tends to be one of the benefits that people attribute to it because it will take nutrients and hold on to them really easy, but then also release them to the plant when they need them. It's not hard for the plant to get the nutrients out of the biochar. So it's good at holding on to the nutrients and releasing them when need be. There has been some studies of, I think they called it terra preta in the Amazon. I want to say it was the Incas that they think perhaps extensively farmed using biochar. They had incredibly rich soil for a rainforest environment. You think of a rainforest as a very lush and just abundant place with life bursting everywhere. You would think it's going to have some of the most fertile soil in the world. The opposite is true. It has some of the least fertile soil because all of that nutrition has been sucked out by the layer upon layer upon layer of living vegetation. And, as things decay, they get rapidly reintegrated into that system and the nutrients just get recycled up very quickly. So it turns out to not be very fertile. But they found that where the Incas, I'm pretty sure it was the Incas, I'll have to look that up again. But where they were farming, they found incredibly rich soil for a rainforest environment. And some have attributed it to this use of biochar, which I am pretty sure is the same thing that they're calling terra preta. I'll look more into that while we're watching the video here. But yeah, so there are other differences of opinion. Some say that biochar is good. Some say it's just kind of a waste. It's, more of a fad thing than other techniques that could be used to build fertility. Uh, you know, you actually do have to burn things to achieve biochar, so there's that part of it as controversy as well. So if we were to do this on a mass scale, you'd have to burn a lot of stuff. And is the amount of carbon you're supposedly locking away uh, offsetting the carbon that is being released in its production? Hard to say. I don't know. I haven't studied the science very closely. But that's what he's doing here. And again, I got to take issue with his characterization of this whole project. He said that this is somehow an upgrade of sheet mulching. So far, all I've seen is chop and drop with a little bit of biochar put on top of it. We'll see if he goes for some more layers after this, but this seems to be a simpler version than sheet mulching. Oh, that's why I was confused, because he said sheet composting slash sheet mulching 2.0 in situ soil building. We'll see. We'll continue on. Oh, I gotta mute this music again. Likes that music quite a lot, doesn't he? Oh. No, still music. So now he's putting in some compost right on top of that. This looks like pretty well finished compost. Kind you'd find at the bottom of any good compost pile that's been turned enough. No, it's still just music. I wish there was a way
Wherever
to
there's biochar,
mute
I
music.
want compost on top of it.
Okay, why? Okay. I mean, that sounded like an interesting... Man, I'm coming up confused again. Wherever I see biochar, I want compost on top of it. Why? Probably because the compost is going to activate that carbon. It's going to give it the nutrients to start holding on to that then can be released to the plant roots later on. That would be my assumption, but he's not really explaining it. So we'll just have to assume at this point. I guess I'm glad this is not a very long video, because I'm certainly not getting much out of it, unfortunately. So he's continuing to put his compost on. Again, this is not exactly sheet mulching or sheet composting even. So far he has 3 layers, maybe? If you even count the biochar as an entire layer, it was kind of a dusting of biochar. I don't know. And now he's just watering it. Okay, let's see. It's back to the talking part.
It's going to ferment in place. It's going to compost in place in sheets. So we're going to end up with incredible soil very, very quickly. It's not an instant garden, though it is kind of like we've set it up instantly. It's an instant setup. So this
That was not instant. That was a lot of work for that little patch.
It's going to be able to decompose within a week or 2. We could cover it at this point if you had, tarps that you could trust, like tightly woven, hemp tarps or something like that. You could trap that moisture in a little bit.
That doesn't sound like a good idea either. When you were putting heavy tarps over things, I mean, at least you said hemp tarps, I suppose. So there's going to be some breathability to it. But when you put like plastic tarps down, that ends up frying everything. That destroys all of the soil life. That's called solarizing. It's a technique. It's a technique to do things like kill noxious weeds or prepare a patch of grass to be turned into something else. but you then have to go back and replenish the soil life, or else you end up with dead soil that's, more susceptible to erosion, that more or less is just there to mechanically hold the roots in place instead of having that living interaction that almost every plant has with some type of soil life, usually fungi, sometimes bacteria as well, though, with the rhizobium that lives in the nodes of a lot of legumes like beans, and they have a symbiotic relationship. The rhizobium makes, what does it make? I can't remember exactly what it is, but basically it makes something for the plant. The plant gives it some nutrients. They feed back and forth on each other. Oh, of course, the rhizobium fixes the nitrogen. Yeah, duh. Uh, it takes nitrogen out of the air and is able to convert it into usable nitrogen for the plant. The plant, in return, I think gives it starch, maybe sugars. I don't recall specifically. Something that keeps the bacteria colonies alive. So, again, if you're killing off the entire soil, though, that's not good for your plants. That's not going to be building healthy soil. So I would worry about putting too heavy of a tarp over the top of it. I feel like it's gonna do damage to that living community. You definitely don't want to smother things if you want them to live. There's a lot of gas exchange, believe it or not, that happens within the layers of soil. Even trees need that. Every plant almost needs that. That's one of the reasons that if you overwater your plants too much, they end up dying. It's not just that the roots start rotting, it's that they can't exchange some of the gases that they otherwise would into the soil, into a drier soil when it gets to that drier phase. So I'm a bit skeptical about covering this. I don't know why you'd cover it anyway. If it's going to be ready in a week or two, most things take at least a few days to sprout. So why not just, assuming that's completely finished compost, why would you not just seed right then if you're doing from seed? Why would you not put the starts in if you're doing it from starts? I mean, I don't know. I don't like this video at all. He has not really backed up anything he says with any reasons even. He's just like, do this, 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 and this. Or I like this, I like that. Haha. And, and then I guess we're just supposed to do it. But why? He's not given the why. I mean, it's not like he has to give you know, a PhD defense of his dissertation about why any of these things should be done, but give us something to go on, some place to explore more. There's the short video, but you can put out links. You could say, hey, this is a link to find more information about why I really like biochar with compost on top of it. He just didn't even explain that. I had to just infer based on what I know. I don't know. If you're getting some out of this video, and then let me know. But I'm not seeing it.
Or you could just hit it again with
Plus,
the M
the
a little bit.
audio is only
Or
coming in
you
my
could
left
hit it with
side.
some
I don't know
compost
how
tea or
that
just keep it watered.
is happening.
And this is going to ferment in place. It's super sunny.
super
We're going to be
annoying.
putting new crops in here soon, so stay tuned. I'm Matt Powers. Grow abundantly, learn daily, and live regeneratively.
I don't know.
Thanks for watching.
I'm sorry. I like hippies in general, but this just seems like some, believe me, brah, and sort of, oh, like just airy nonsense. Or that might have things behind it, but he's just not aware enough of where others are at. Why? I mean, if we're doing an educational video, part of it has to be this is what we do, but also here's why we do it. He just doesn't seem to grasp that part. I don't know. I haven't watched too much Matt Powers content, and this is not giving me a good reason to watch more. Boy, you know what? I may even chop this off at the beginning of my final video. Because really, what do we just watch? This by contrast, I'm sure is going to be very informative. This is by Landscape Transformation with Mike Hogue, friend of the show. He's been on, has a new book out. You should go check it out. It's called Beauty in Abundance. And he's going to tell us about slash mulch and chop and drop techniques to build fertility right where it's being grown. That's one of the cool things about some of these permaculture techniques is the idea is always to do less. It's kind of the one straw revolution philosophy of what can we not do? What labor can we refrain from and still achieve a desired result or a desirable result? So in this case, it's instead of having to import in a lot of uh, various things for fertilizer, what if we just use the plants that are growing up, especially things like weeds, or things that are less desirable for one reason or another? Why don't we use them right where they are as fertilizer and mulch? One way to keep down the weeds is to smother them with vegetation. It makes it harder for them to grow. So, if nature is just growing you fertilizer right where you're standing, why not use it? That's I was thinking the same thing, Sam. What is he doing? He was literally just dumping stuff on the ground, saying this is how you do it. And like he might as well played that Montel song, this is how you do it, and walked off because that's about all the information we got. Um, I don't know. Yeah. I feel bad that I started with that video because it's not off to a good start. But we're gonna turn it around here because I know Mike is incredibly knowledgeable, and he will definitely get into the why these techniques are important. Uh, I'm sure he'll explain it even better than I just have. But let's get into this one.
Here I have an area of bed where I've already gone through and harvested out the perennial crops. Got a nice clean bed here, done some chop and drop on it. You can see it looks like it's basically been mulch. And right about here you see a tomato and you see another couple tomatoes. I like to plunk in another tomato because I have some extra and I've got a little bit of extra room at the end of the bed here. So I'm going to do that. So here's the spot where I want to plant in the tomato. I got it there about where I want it. And so I had already chopped and dropped here. I'm just going to, plunk down to take a look at what the soil's like, whether or not the weeds have died back here already. I say weeds, it's mostly crops.
So notice too, let me move that up out of the way of where he's working. Notice too, what is that? What does all that stuff look like? All of that dry material. It looks a lot like straw or hay, which is something that people use as a mulch, as something to suppress weeds. But instead of having to go somewhere else to get it, he just takes it right from where it's at. He chops it, and chop and drop usually involves breaking the root. Like you want to pull things out by the root if you can. If you can't, you cut them off as close to the ground as possible, and then you break them so that they can't regrow, and then you just drop them where they're at. It's about as simple as you can get in terms of mulching. So look, all he has to do then to then build space or make space for his new plant is he pushes aside a little bit of the grass that he's chopped and dropped. And hey, lo and behold, there is a nice sheltered space for his new tomato to go into. Pretty cool, huh?
Garlic and yarrow, things that I actually do harvest. It's looking pretty good in there.
Good evening, Natalie. Good to see you.
It's been a bit wet, so there's actually a bit more. Here's a pawpaw seed. It hasn't germinated yet, but I do eat a lot of pawpaws and just kind of spit them into the garden here and there. And a lot of times they germinate. Maybe this one got a little too dried out.
I love that too. Why go to the trouble of having to sow seed in a really, intensive way where you're just like, one step and then, a handful of seed, one step, a handful of seed. Why not instead, as you're enjoying the fruits, in this case, a pawpaw, a great sounding fruit. I have not had the pleasure of tasting one myself. That's why I envy his. I think he's in zone 6 even. Uh, Down there, kind of I think he's in the bottom of. I think he's moved now into Indiana, kind of like the border between Indiana and Michigan. It's a couple zones, maybe more, warmer than where I'm at. So pawpaws grow really well. And for those of you that don't know, pawpaw is one of the largest fruits in North America, and I believe the largest flowering, or the largest flower of any tree in North America. And what they produce is about mango-sized fruits in clusters of 4. And they have seeds. You do have to remove the seeds, which is why you don't often see them commercially. For whatever reason, seed separation tends to be the sticking point for the commercial viability of a lot of stuff. That's why navel oranges became so hugely popular, is because they were a mutation where it didn't produce seed, or at least noticeable seed. The same thing with bananas. Bananas used to have large seeds, but they managed to, through breeding and singling out mutations, get it to where the male and the female of the banana flowers at different times, so they never pollinate and seeds never get big. You can look into a banana and see little black dots. Those are actually the seeds. They would be much larger, though, in its more wild form. So for whatever reason, seeds are difficult to deal with in fruits when it comes to commercial viability, and they just haven't figured out how to get the big seeds out of the pawpaws. Hence why you don't tend to see it at grocery stores, even if you live in areas where they are widely grown. Like I think Kentucky is like the epicenter of pawpaw country. But anyway, supposedly they taste like banana custard. I've never had one. I can't attest to any of the flavors, but it sounds pretty delicious to me. So as he was just munching on his fruit that he was enjoying in his own garden, instead of a trip to the compost pile, throw the seeds around. See what sprouts. See what likes its conditions it finds itself in. It may seem like a lazy way of doing things, but actually it's a very smart and time-saving way of doing things. They talk about this a lot. Masanobu Fukuoka talks about this a lot in the One Straw Revolution, where he's like, why do you harvest an entire crop of rice and then go plant, I forgot what it was, wheat or whatever the alternate crop was to the rice, at a separate time? Why don't you harvest one crop and at the same time plant the next one, and then leave the straw just sitting in the field from the rice straw, so that it provides cover for the seeds that you're putting out for the next crop? That's the do nothing method. It's the what can we do without? What labor can we get rid of just by designing things differently? What he's talking about here, what Mike is talking about, not really different than that. It's why go to the trouble of purposely planting each pawpaw seed when you can just spit it out, see if it does good. As long as there's more pawpaw fruits every year, there's more chances for more trees to germinate and thrive. And it might come in places you never would have thought of. That's kind of the other beauty part of it, is there's microclimates throughout every garden. Every spot's going to be a little bit different conditions than the one next to it. So you may think, well, this is the perfect place for a pawpaw tree, but the pawpaw seed might think differently. And all the pawpaws you plant right there in that little chunk may not ever survive for reasons you may not even understand. Maybe there's a particular grazing animal that likes to come through, and it's a real easy spot for it to see the seedlings and nibble off the ends of it. It could be something like that. It could just be the wrong conditions that you didn't know about in terms of sun or water or any number of things. So this is making a lot of little bets, and at the same time, that is a resilient way of doing things instead of just efficiently focusing only on efficiency. Oh, okay. I'm going to let this video run for a little bit. I have to go get my dinner, and I will be right back with you.
Actually going to plunk it right back down there. See, maybe it's going to germinate. So I'll take my mater here. This one's a Berkeley pink tie-dye, and put my label back down there, and See if I can disturb that a little bit. Get that in there pretty nice. Yeah, the soil here is really a little too wet to work for doing this. But it's really good timing otherwise. And I think with all the earthworm activity and everything going on in this garden, they're going to take care of that pretty well. So I got my tomato planted. Didn't have to dig or anything to do it. You can tell I still have garlic and some other things around here, yarrow. Right now, while these are getting established, they're going to provide enough shade to help them get going. Later, I can chop and drop out more if I want. Just chop and drop that in place. Make a little bit more room for sun infiltration to really help these grow. But right now, I think I want that shade. Now, this is why I always say I like to have mulch maker plants in all my beds, because I didn't just have to go and get some mulch here to mulch my tomatoes after I planted it. I have yarrow, which is an excellent mulch maker plant, just right here waiting, ready to go. I'm gonna get some more of that down. That's looking real good. And now I'm in here on the path. There is permanent path, permanent bed. In a garden like this, it's a little bit hard to tell this time of season. And I've got some peppers now, and I'm gonna plant those out. So I'm just gonna use traditional biointensive spacings. I have 4 of them here. I'm gonna put them, in this case, about 10 inches apart, in a place towards an edge of the bed where they're going to get lots of sun. And the bed has already been harvested and chop and drop mulched, and it's just ready to plant out. So I'm going to do that. Now, there's very few weeds in a bed like this, but I did find some here. So I'm going to trowel out this grass a little bit and plop a pepper in there with my handy hory.
And now while I'm doing that, I'm going to talk at you. I'm going to talk at you people. Okay, so yeah, you can see me plunking that out. It's pretty easy to do in a garden like this. I just plop that there weed right on the top of the bed. Later, I want this to be pretty. I'm going to come back and throw some finished mulch on here and make this look like a real pretentious garden, by the time the next set of guests come through. Which may or may not ever happen again because of this whole COVID thing. So just measuring out the peppers, you see I kind of pull apart the mulch. That's the remnants of some whatever was grown in the bed last fall, some lemongrass that didn't get harvested, or the remnants of lemongrass fronds when I took the cores. Just chop and drop down on there. Because the bed is constantly mulched in polyculture, the soil is so amazing. It takes just very little effort to dig in this. A lot of times, if the soil isn't quite so wet, I'll do this work with my bare hands. And this is pepper number 3 going in there. 3 and 4, those got kind of combined together. So I'm going to separate them apart, and they're going to be growing a little bit too close to each other. But you know what? In a garden like this, I'm not trying to maximize the output of everything. I'm just being very practical about things. Yeah, it's a little bit different than a traditional grow biointensive garden where you're using like cardboard spacers and getting things perfect. I don't need things to be perfect. I'm just gonna go with the flow on this thing here and get that in there.
I like that. Go with the flow. That's what we should all be going for. Sorry about that. I had to go get some food. Let me get the microphone back over to me. Microclimates, yes. So microclimate is like think of a house, and let's say part of one face of a very basic 4-sided house is going to face south. In the northern climate, that means that's going to be the hottest part. That's going to get the most direct sun. It's going to be the place where your sunniest, your sun-lovingest plants are going to want to go. Then on the east side, that's where some of the earliest sun rays are going to hit, on the east side of the house. So that's where you're going to want to put plants that maybe don't like that early morning frost. So they're going to get that frost off of them as soon as possible. And then also in the afternoon, they'll be sheltered from the hot the hottest part of the day when the sun is coming from the west. So they won't get as harsh of light and as much of a drying effect. So it's going to be a little warmer in the morning and cooler in the afternoon, and then a little bit more moist overall because it's going to be getting the most sun as the atmosphere is starting to heat up. So already we have two different microclimates just around one house. Now we look to the west side. That's where you're going to want to put some of your more drought tolerant plants, usually, because that's going to be when the day is hottest. You're not going to get as direct sun as if it was everything facing south, probably. It still may get that south facing sun, but not for as much of the day. Part of the day it's going to be sheltered by the house, right? So you want to make sure that it can take some late morning frost. So the plants that you put there, you have to take that into consideration, as well as when the day has gotten to its hottest point, which is usually sometime in the early to mid afternoon. It's going to be getting full sun. So it's going to be drying out the most. So that's going to be the driest side of your house on the west side there. So now we have three different microclimates right around one house. Now the north side of the house, that's going to get the least light of all. It's going to be sheltered for most of the day. You might get some very early morning sun and some very late evening sun. But in between that time, it's mostly going to be sheltered by the house. So it's going to be the coldest part, it's going to be the darkest part, and likely going to be the dampest part of your yard. But there we go. Four different microclimates, four different sets of considerations in just one house. And that could be any number of things can affect that. If you have a hillside, it's the same sort of thing. North side of the hill in the northern hemisphere, going to have those same conditions as the north side of a house. South side of the hill, same sort of thing. So you always want to take that into consideration when you're planning out where things should go. Because if you want to grow a lot of very sun-loving stuff, like especially most vegetables that we think of as staple vegetables, your peppers, your tomatoes, your onions, that sort of thing, they love the sun because what they tend to be is plants that are annuals that also thrive in more disturbed areas. So areas that have just abundance of sun open to them. So if you want to grow a bunch of that sort of thing, you want to make sure that you're not going to put like a big oak tree to the south of that, because that's going to end up shading out that entire area. If you want to put some trees, though, there are other trees you could consider. Trees that have a more open form, like a honey locust. That's one of the best trees in North America. If you want to have some shelter, some shade, but still have enough sunlight that you can grow some more higher light stuff underneath it. At the same time, what's up? Okay. Uh, so anyway, it's okay. You can say something.
The pizza box is not on the bed, right?
No. It's right here. Don't worry. It's in the kitchen, the pizza box. Okay. Moving on. So, there's a design consideration based on the microclimate that you're trying to put together. And it can go from there. There could be different microclimates based on which way the wind comes from most. Which areas flood, seasonal flooding. That makes a completely different climate than areas that don't flood. Tons and tons of considerations can go into and factors that can make different microclimates relatively close to each other. So overall, the climate might be, say, woodland area, like eastern hardwood woodlands, which is what you see all over the east coast of North America, basically all the way out to Minnesota, Iowa. That stuff starts dropping off. Missouri even. It starts giving way to the prairie ecosystems. But even within those larger biomes, there's different hardiness zones. There's how low the temperature is likely to go on an average winter, and all sorts of different factors. So you may have an overarching climate zone or type of climate or type of biome, but in different little pockets, conditions may be very different. Most of the time, that's good for permaculture because that means we get to grow a diversity of stuff all in a very small area. So you might put ferns on the north side of your house. You can eat fiddlehead ferns. There are other ferns you can eat too. I think ostrich fern is another one. Uh, Always look these things up though before you try sampling yourself. Um, if you have a desire to attract pollinators, you're going to probably want to do more of the prairie wildflowers if you're in, zone 4 like I am, if you're in a prairie biome. That stuff is probably going to want to go in some of the sunniest and hottest places in your yard. Uh, at the same time, you may have a want for fruit trees. You're probably going to want to protect that from things like cold north winds, which could crack things in the winter for a fruit tree. You probably want to protect it from frost pockets. So you're going to want to have it in an area that drains well, especially if it's an early fruiter. The general rule is the earlier a tree or berry fruits, the earlier its blossoms come out. And so some years you're going to be riding that line where there's still maybe frost past the point when blossoms come out. And that can wreak havoc on a fruit tree's blossoms, having frost. So you want to make sure it's in an area where the cold air in the morning and nighttime is not going to pool around it and cause it to frost more. You want to have good drainage, not just of water, but of air. Another consideration, how does the air flow across? Not just the wind, but how does the air settle? At the nighttime, how does that cold air settle? In the morning time, how does it start lifting back up off of the property? And it can seem overwhelming, all these factors to think about, but really, it just takes a bit of observation. And more than anything, it takes you noticing things like, hey, this thing is doing really well here. What are the specific conditions that I see in this area? I like bee balm a lot. That's actually one of my favorite wildflowers is bee balm. Attracts tons of pollinators, especially bumblebees, which are much more endangered than your European honeybee in North America. Bumblebees are native bees, but they're also really important pollinators. And there's certain flowers that are almost exclusively visited by bumblebees because of their different physiology and predilection for different sorts of flowers. Anyway, if I want to have some shoot, I forgot where I was going with this, but if I want to have some bee balm in my yard, um, dang it, I've lost the thread. But anyway, we'll continue on with the video at this point, I think, and I'll try and see if I can circle back to that point.
Well, at this point in the season, the garden is starting to take on that kind of dimension with quite a lot of open space. Good spacings for plant growth, lots of constant ground cover in between things. I'm getting pretty happy with it. So, what am I not happy with in the garden? Well, this spot right here. Mostly because, like I said before, I don't have 3 stomachs, so I can't eat these grasses, even if they're lovely. Normally, I'm seeing my fortress plantings actually are still kind of working okay, and they're keeping the grass at bay. But here I have a type 1 error, which is I have bricks as a border, and those provide the perfect opportunity, the perfect niche for plants to get in there. We do that as kind of an aesthetic thing, and it makes more work for us, but we're kind
Thank you so much, Alyosha, for your generous cheer of 5 bits. Thank you so much. Good to see you tonight. How are you doing? How have your holidays been? If you've been celebrating any holidays recently, how are you doing? Good to have you. My mic is deciding it's not wanting to stick to my desk right now. Okay, it's really just going, huh? All right. Some technical difficulties here. Sorry about all that. Waiting for a check. Oh, God, that could be some of the worst type of waiting. I hope it arrives swiftly for you. You know, it could be the scarlet bee balm. That's definitely one of my favorite ones. That's quite striking. And you could see in the video just recently here, some of the pink flowers that were sticking out above his yard. Those were your more generic native bee balms, native to places like my area. There we go. Reattachment established. Um, I think I was going like, you know, if I want to have bee balm, I have to know what conditions it likes. I know it likes sun. I know that it needs to have air flow going through it to prevent things like powdery mildew from building up. That's one of the main antagonistic pathogens for bee balm is powdery mildew. Which, if you keep things moving, if you keep a little breeze moving through your system, tends not to be able to form and accumulate. It needs that high humidity, high moisture climate. But knowing that, hey, maybe the hottest, driest part of my house is going to be the perfect spot to put bee balm up against. Um, I think that's where I was going with that. It's not entirely sure, but thank you for looking that up, Sam. I really do appreciate it. Natalie says that you think you need to learn about Twitch since I've been using it more. Yeah. Okay. So bits. Bits are a way to instead of subbing to a channel, you may have noticed there's always the option to sub to a channel. So instead of just doing that, it's more of a direct donation. Comes out roughly to 1 bit is 1 cent. Uh, so you know, 100 bits is $1, thousand, $10, stuff like that. I don't know if it's a perfect conversion, but that's my general conception of it. Always important to note, though, too, that half of all the bits that you donate goes straight to Twitch, which is owned by Amazon. So Bezos takes half of whatever you donate. Same thing with your subscriptions. You just can't get by it. Yes, you can buy bits in mass and then just have them on hand for, you know, a streamer says something you think is really cool. Hey, it's like an extra sort of way to cheer. So that's why it usually says cheered with such and such bits. Yeah, Twitch, Amazon takes such a percent. That's what a racket, you know, for not really having to do anything then provide server space and a few mods. They really get a lot back for their investment. Um, anyway, anyway, that's the basics of cheering. So there's two main ways to donate through Twitch, and that's a subscription. Subscriptions usually are more bang for your buck in terms of what you get back as a viewer, because if it's a channel that has ads, like from time to time, you may have noticed that when you click on my channel, when it goes live, you have to watch a 30-second ad or something ahead of being able to see what I'm talking about. If you were then subscribed, you would not have to see that ad, and that's a per channel thing. So you'd have to get a subscription to every channel you didn't want to see ads on. Some channels are so large once you get to like the partner stage, they tend to run more ads, but you can avoid those ads too by subscribing, and you get access to custom emotes. Like I'll show you the emotes that I got. Let me just put them in chat real quick here. Um, Yeah, it's not going to let me do it too easily. I'm going to have to change around to a different screen here to be able to show you my emotes. So here's my custom ones. I actually have some more uh, spots right now. So there, if you subscribe to my channel, you get to use those anywhere across Twitch. Um, I think I actually have more slots. So at some point here, I'll ask for suggestions to as to what I should do for my extra emotes. And also, for a certain number of bits that you cheer, you can unlock emotes too. And I haven't even looked into that sort of thing yet too. But there's a lot of cool stuff you get for being a subscriber. And then every year it'll ask, or every month it'll ask you, do you want to resubscribe? And if you say yes, then you get the same benefits. And there's different tiers of subscription too. The basic one is $5 a month. I think next up is 10, if I'm not mistaken. I've never done a tier 3 subscription, so I don't know how much that is. But you get extra stuff. Like there's, you know, for your larger streamers, there's different emotes that get unlocked for each tier of subscription. So you can have, you know, super ones. Um, Oh, there's channel points that you can unlock emotes for. Oh, see, I haven't even looked, I haven't even taken the time to look too much into it. Um, oh, I see. You're responding to Natalie's question. Okay. Oh no, you can press that button just fine. What that button does is it tells Twitch that you are a viewer. You are a real person and that you are viewing still. So it'll still count you on my viewer total, which is good for me. It helps me keep my affiliate status. Uh, and eventually, if I got enough people viewing, I could get up to being a partner. That's not for a ways off. I think you need an average of 75 viewers per stream, or per streaming minute, in fact. Your average has to be 75 in order to make partner. And I'm pretty far from that now. Channel points, it's another thing I got to do. Another thing I got to do. Usually it's just like you can make a funny. It depends on the streamer. It's all up to the streamer what they give as a reward. But you can make it like a silly sound effect plays on the screen. You can make it like remind me to take a drink of water. If I was a streamer that did this a lot, I know that's on Hannah Reloaded stream. You can use channel points to say remember to hydrate, stuff like that. Avenging Pineapple. Slugs do so much damage to my poppy crop. Oh, that's terrible. And terrible to hear that. One of the best natural controls for slugs is actually ducks. Unlike chickens, they're not going to peck apart your plants, so you don't have to worry about that. And they also don't scratch, so you don't have to worry about tender seedlings coming up and being scratched out either. Um, but they love slugs. Like there's nothing that a duck loves more than slugs. So if you got domestic ducks and you kept them in your garden, you'd see that slug problem go away pretty quick. Yeah, you need a lot of really. It basically is celebrity status. Like there's people I know that do this professionally. Who one guy, Idan Simpson, only just made partner after doing this for over a year, um, as his main job. Like this is his main source of income, and he only just recently made partner. And he has a much cooler stream than I do, in terms of its look and its interactivity. Like you can he's got different channel point unlocks where you can like punch use on screen. You can make different sound effects and things, different graphics pop up out of it. He goes all out, and he just made partner. So it's one of those things for me that it'd be really cool if I could make that someday, but I'm not really in a position where I can devote this or devote enough time for this to be my full time job. And basically, that's what it takes to make partner. Not many ducks in the Andes. Oh, you're in the Andes. Well, that does change things, doesn't it? Hmm. I am not familiar with Andean flora and fauna, but I would bet you there's something that eats slugs that lives where you do. Unless these are somehow non-native poppies that you're talking about, there's going to be something that naturally views that as its best dinner option. Maybe it's a reptile, maybe it's an amphibian. I don't really know, but that would be something worth researching. What in my area eats slugs? Lots of snow, water, and rocks. Cool, cool. I'm better streamer than Dan Simpson. Wow, that's quite the compliment. He's one of the people that's really inspired me. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I mean that means a lot. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Oh, bleep blomp Ben, you can use channel points to make him sing a song for you. I'm not I'm not going to venture to lend my singing voice to this stream yet. Um, so that would be something that's kind of off the table for me. But there's so many things and it all is custom to whatever the streamer wants to do. At some point, I'll have some extra time, and I will set up channel point rewards and stuff like that. Well, thank you. That's a high compliment because I do tend to like his analysis as well. Thanks very much, Sam. Anyway, back to your question, avenging pineapple. I'm sure there's something that eats slugs in your area. So it's just a matter of if it's a domestic animal, well, then that's a much easier solution. I would bet that there's I don't see why ducks wouldn't survive. I mean, maybe if you're at a really high altitude, but ducks love water, of course. They're built for water. They're built for wet environments, so that shouldn't be a problem. Ducks shouldn't worry about rocks too much either, so that shouldn't be a problem. So if you're in an area where people keep chickens, my guess is you could also keep ducks. Maybe harder to come by, but it's maybe something worth looking into. Oh no, cocoa growers spray poisons on their cocoa crops, so when it is refined into coca, not cocoa. I see. When it's refined into cocaine, the person using ingest dangerous poisons. Yeah. Okay, so you don't want to spray poisons. That's the deal. That's good. I mean, that's definitely good if you're going to use wildlife to help manage your crops. But anyway, I would surmise that if people in your area grow or raise chickens, you can also raise ducks. And chickens probably are going to eat slugs too. Maybe not as efficiently as ducks, and you do have to worry about them, pecking apart more tender crops, especially. So you have to be a little more careful about what you do. But at least if you start out with just maybe 2 or 3 chickens, let them into your garden for a little bit and monitor them closely, and then shoo them out. That could be a way to do it. Otherwise, yeah, just find out what naturally lives in your area that would be likely to eat slugs and try to attract it to your garden. If it's an amphibian, put in a pond. There's few things that attract frogs and toads more than ponds. If it's some sort of a reptile, maybe if you have a bundle of sticks that you could pile up somewhere, they tend to like sticks for shelter. There's a lot of things you can do. But yeah, I just suggest you look into either some sort of domestic animal or what to do to attract an animal that eats slugs, and go from there. That would be a good strategy to employ. Because the worst thing that you don't want to spray poisons, because that's going to be a lifelong commitment to spraying poisons. Because you're going to, for one thing, you're probably going to kill all the natural predators that otherwise would eat the slugs, along with killing those slugs. And for another thing, it doesn't do anything to stop the reason that slugs are getting into your yard, into your garden, and eating your stuff. So you really it's treating the symptoms of the problem and never the root cause. So what you really need to do is try and treat the root cause. And the only way to really do that is to have something actively manage your stuff for you. Some sort of animal, in this case. Anyway, let's get back to the video. I'm gonna eat a little bit more and try and
Kind
mute
of willing
myself,
to do it for the aesthetic
so you don't have to hear me chew.
Maybe someday I won't be. Maybe one day I will fully unleash my laziness and pull out all these edgers.
Oh, and that's a good point too. Be careful with geese. Geese are very different than ducks in terms of management. Geese, yeah, geese are a lot harder to manage. But ducks, much more compact, much more self-contained, much more domesticated. So they're used to living around people more. Wow, they're to the point where they're blocking roads in your city. That's incredible, Natalie. But yeah, I would go with ducks over geese in this case, especially if it's a small plot that you're managing.
Because they just add more garden work, and ultimately you only see them a small part of the year anyway. So normally I just chop and drop these, but I'm going to do something a little more permanent, which is a spot mulch. Which means I am going to try to move out some of these bricks a little bit, get in there, chop and drop this, but then I'm going to throw down a covering of some wet cardboard or newspaper and mulch over the top of that. And then this will last for a few more years. So you did just catch me doing a thing that I almost never do in this garden, which is legit hand weeding. I actually did pull out some of these grasses that had started to infiltrate. Here's one more. This kind of thing is just usually too precious for me. It's too fiddly in terms of both the aesthetic and the work, and I just don't do it. So here's my pile of mulch though, and it's a lot, so I really don't even need the cardboard or newspaper level in here, but I'm going to do it anyway just to demo that. So here's my wet cardboard and newspaper I'm about to just sort of put down. We go under the landscaping bricks a little bit to prevent weeds encroaching, and go right up to the plants wherever I can. Okay, well, I've removed that bit of grass, got some mulch down around it. Later I'm going to use that cocoa mulch to make it look real pretty. But I need to kind of settle down a little bit first. Looks like nice spacings on there. There's some things about this guild I could improve, some things I'm not happy with. But overall, it's going to do pretty well this summer, and I probably won't have to weed it again. That's going to produce a whole succession of food all summer long, and then have some perennials for next season. Okay, so I usually try to put something funny into all of my videos, and this time I have something hilarious, which is my Rona hair. I got some nice thing going on here. I did my last Rona haircut by myself. I looked pretty sweet, so I thought I'd do another one, and did a nice unintentional kind of nice fade there. Got this real sweet looking Rona hair there going on. Oh yeah. So just thought I'd spice up the video here with a few Rona hair laughs. Guess it's gonna be hat season for me until we get back into the old chop shop. Get the hair bone polished up by a professional. Alright, you people have fun a chopping and a dropping, and make friends with your weeds and grasses out there in the garden. I don't know, people put like weird taglines at the end of videos. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
Okay, so I hope you have a better understanding of what Chop and Drop is all about. I really love Mike's videos and the way he conducts his educational stuff. And he's really funny too. So, yeah, it's an interesting way to kind of flip problems on their head, isn't it? Where one of the founders of permaculture, Bill Mollison, famous for saying the problem is the solution. So what he would often say is like, you don't have a weed problem, you have a lack of chop and drop problem. All those weeds are making free compost for you, free mulch for you, right where they're needed. All you got to do, rip them out of the ground, chop them, put them back down, and it's free weed barriers for you, a free way to keep more moisture in the soil, protect from the elements like rain and wind, all that stuff. Natalie says that the University of Illinois has a group that has been trying to figure out how to control these geese problems there. My daughter had to do a short intern in the group. She's studying for a degree in social work. Oh, that's really cool. I had an internship with the city of Ramsey, which is, if any of you are well aware of the Twin Cities Metro, is right next to Anoka. For everybody else, it's basically a very small, not even really a suburb per se. It's a small town, more or less, that's to the north and west of Minneapolis. Anyway, the city of Ramsey had built this beautiful central park. It had a gorgeous amphitheater, and the sound was really cool. The sound was such that when you stood on the stage in a certain spot, you could clap, and from every angle, it was like this big half circle. It would echo at you perfectly, so you could say something. You could whisper really, like at this level, and you could hear the whisper coming back at you. It was just this really cool acoustics of it. Anyway, they spent like millions of dollars on it. And behind the amphitheater was this artificial lake, and they called the whole park was called the Draw, because it was this long kind of Um, it was a long, skinny pond, basically, artificially created. Um, and part of my program as an intern, part of my duties was to clean up goose poop because I found out later through my research. I did an independent research project for them to figure out why there was so much goose poop around this amphitheater all the time, every week. Um, I was literally filling up 5 gallon buckets worth of poop every week. I'm like, oh, this is stupid. There's got to be a better way to do this. So I did some research and I found out that what geese love more than anything is to have a body of water and a grassy field right next to each other where they don't have to fly in between the two. They can just waddle on out, eat a bunch of grass, poop it out, and go back into the water. And if there's any predators, quickly escape to the water. That's like geese paradise. And the reason for that is that geese don't like to fly if they don't have to. They might fly to get from, one grazing area to another if they really have to, but they don't like doing it. They have very heavy bones, they have very heavy bodies for a bird. They like to conserve their energy. And you don't get a lot of nutrition from grass, so you have to eat a whole lot of it in order to maintain the body of a goose. Um, and I found that along this draw here, there was a fence. And I had plotted out where the worst geese areas were. And sure enough, the worst geese areas corresponded to where there was, say, a gap in the fence, where they had wedged their way through some bushes to get to the grass and go back and forth. And I'm like, all you got to do is put a little bit more fence past this part because they weren't coming to where the fences were up along the water. They were only going to where there was a gap in the fence that they could squeeze through. I was like, put up a fence there. Uh, it would save. Oh, I'm sorry about that, Natalie. Hopefully that's just. I mean, I'm hoping you're not having terrible technical issues, but hopefully it's not the whole stream that's experiencing gaps in speech. Um, but anyway, I'll continue on. So I was like, if you put a gate here, or if you put a fence here, it's going to keep the geese out. They'll stay on this side of the. They'll stay on the other side of the pond. Almost no one goes over there for any of the concerts. And we would get, 400 or 500 people. I think we had up to like 700 people at our largest concert because it's a small town. There's not much else to do. And we would get part of my duties was to manage the concert series because they had to justify this $1 million park and this huge amphitheater. So they would get a series of concerts. It was like every Friday. Bring in, a Beatles cover band. Most of them are cover bands of one kind or another. Sometimes they would be like, all decked out and like there was an Elvis impersonator, that sort of thing. Um, so anyway, I had to deal with the booking of the bands, but I knew that like there's not people that sit over on the other side of the water. Everyone sits in the amphitheater. Um, So just let the geese be over there. Make that a more attractive area. The geese will go over there instead, and we don't have to worry about spending hours cleaning poop every week. So I came up with all this research. I submitted my proposal. I'm like, the geese are even their poop is bad for the water itself. You could see it's just disgusting tangles of algae in the man-made pond. And I'm like, absolutely, this is coming in part because geese poop on the grass gets mowed, there's nothing really to stop the poop and it just washes back into the pond. It was gross. I'm like, let's stop this. We can we can solve two problems at once. We can clean up the water to make it more usable because no one would use it. It was a stinky man-made pond. No one would actually go in it. It would just sat there and look pretty, as pretty as a an algae infested pond can look. But if you didn't look too close, it looked like a nice body of water. Anyway, I'm like, let's do this. So I submitted all my research to my internship supervisor, who was the assistant head of the parks department, and he's like, "Oh yeah, well researched, good job." And then I never heard anything more about it, and I heard more from other employees that he's like, yeah, he just doesn't want to block any access to the water because people might want to go over there and fish. I'm like, you don't have to do that though. Like you could put up a gate. Geese can't use gates. Just do that. Put in a dock too, because there was no dock. There's no actual way to really interact with the water. No one wants to go wade, ankle deep into the mud to go fishing. Nobody fished there except for off the overpasses, because there was a couple overpasses that went over it. And and besides that, how much big fish can you actually get in a pond that's choked with algae? Like put in a gate, put in a dock. You could rent paddle boats. People could paddle boat while they're, uh, you know, enjoying their concerts or just on an afternoon, whatever. It could be a self-serve system because they had this whole, unique self-serve canoe system where you get a card from the city office, and then you go out to this certain lake, and it has lockers that will unlock when you swipe the card. You swipe the card, and you have access to the oars, all the life jackets, and you can unlock a canoe. And that way, you don't have to have an attendant on call or on staff to come help people out. It's a self-service system that avoids, the worst excesses of vandalism and misuse. It was pretty cool. And it was an idea that was later adopted by the Minnesota DNR for a bunch of areas that they didn't want to have to staff, but still wanted people to have access to, low impact water equipment. I was like, do the same thing, but do it for paddle boats. It'd be a win, 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 win at this point. Better access to the water that you're so scared about, less geese pooping everything up, um, and cleaner water all in one go. But he was not having it. I think he just didn't like to listen to other people's ideas. I don't really know what the issue was in the end because it would have been a simple, simple solution, but he just didn't go for it. But anyway, um, yeah, geese don't use gates. Yeah, right. I mean, despite what Untitled Goose Game will have you believe, geese, in fact, cannot use most human operated devices. Uh, anyway, yeah, right. Yeah, good point, Natalie. They put up signs telling people don't feed the geese. Well, they want to leave opportunities for them to mess everything up. It just doesn't make any sense. And beyond that, they had this really cool idea of let's irrigate that whole park through the pond water, the water that just naturally drains. It would drain all the nearby streets, go into that pond. Let's use that to irrigate the park. We don't have to pump any extra irrigation water. It's a more green solution. But guess what happened? Every year, by about midsummer, that system gets completely choked with algae. Who could have thought that? So, not only would it have solved all those other problems, they would have kept their irrigation system in better working order. But whatever. It's out of my hands now. I'm not, I'm many years removed from that internship. So hopefully they've come up with some better solutions, but it was just dumb. Um, but what I gathered was he also, my internship supervisor was one of those kind of old school guys who believe that, hard work builds character and work just for the sake of work is somehow good. And so he liked it that interns would have to go out and scoop poop because it showed that they were dedicated to parks and recreation. Some BS like that. It was dumb. But until they may, yeah, yeah, that's right. Someday the geese may rise up. We must befriend our geesey brethren, lest we taste their wrath later on. But anyway, that was a big digression there. Um, the point of all of this is don't do extra work. Don't make extra work for yourself, especially when nature's providing solutions. So in the case of chop and drop, nature's giving you solutions to help keep down the weeds that you're fighting in the first place. Really simple techniques. You chop, you pull up, you chop, you drop it back down. Becomes free mulch for you. Weed suppressant, water, you know, um, keeps the water in, it provides habitat for predatory insects. It's good all around. Instead of having to buy separate mulch that you have to truck in from some other source and put out on your paths and in areas that you don't want weeds popping up in, and have to keep doing it year after year. We want to reduce the amount of inputs that are needed for any given space. So when nature is giving you those inputs for free on site, why not use them? That's the permaculture way. Small and slow solutions. That ties in very much with that principle. It's a pretty small thing to chop and drop a few weeds, but over time, the benefits just keep building up through that little bit of effort. I don't know. I don't see how he could have seen me as a threat either. I mean, that's a possibility, Sam, but I was just an intern. Uh, he was definitely next in line for the head of the Parks Department's job, and that guy I think ended up retiring a couple years after that. So I'm guessing he's the current Parks and Rec intern for the city of or intern, manager for the city of Ramsey. And he was also the public works superintendent. So he had two different jobs that he was constantly doing. Like, this is an incredibly unsupervised, unstructured internship. Like, he would give me a project and basically say, have at it. And I would just manage it, which I like. I like that sort of management style myself. As long as I have clear instructions about what I'm doing, I got no problem just working on my own and working out solutions on my own. In fact, I like to have a little bit of space and leeway to have time to ponder things and come up with creative ways of problem solving. So that part was cool. But yeah, everyone in that entire, I mean, you could tell when he would have meetings and interactions with other heads of other departments, they were all incredibly intimidated by this guy. So I don't know why he would ever be threatened by me. I don't know. I guess it's best not to dwell on it too long and just realize that it gave me one more thing that I can put in my own design portfolio and one more piece of knowledge that I can use in the future. So I definitely benefited from it, even if whatever. Let's see. So it's saying a link was deleted in your chat. Not sure what that is. Not doing it. Huh. Could be. Let's take a look at the Twitch chat directly, briefly. Let's see if we can get some clues to that. Mm. Oh. Oh, Natalie. I see. I see what happens. So that comment that you made, until they star star star. I wonder if that is a word that is now auto-modded. Would it happen to be a word that starts with a C and ends with an ack or acker? Because I think that's now banned by Twitch. So that's probably it. Um, I'm guessing that's what happened there. That's funny. Yeah. Oh, for those of you that don't follow um, Twitch drama, it's better you just stay in that lane. But for those that do, you may have heard of the C word gate that's happened recently. The C word being a slur for white people, which no white person, myself included, has ever been offended by. Um, but apparently, Twitch has policies against slurs, and they pretty arbitrarily decided to exercise that policy against Hassan, who's the biggest leftist streamer on this platform. And they gave him like a 1 week ban, and he got pretty mad about it. And it's kicked off a lot of really terrible, odious debate about, is it really a slur? Is it appropriate at all? Did Twitch overreact? Do they maintain um, terms of service appropriately? All the stuff. It's been dumb. Um, well, interesting. It looks like it did delete that couple of words you said, Natalie. Here's the comment once again. Until they, I'm guessing that's the word that was deleted, and they may deleted again. So that's the one that that Twitch probably had a problem with. Who knows? Who knows why? It could be just on the list of banned words. It could be a word that I have banned myself in the chat. I've had to do that recently since I've had some persistent trolls who come in and try to just say dumb things to get me in trouble. Um, but whatever. I don't think it's anything to worry about either way, Natalie. It probably was just something that got flagged for no good reason. So anyway, let's move on. This next one, I don't know if I want to do the one. I had switched my playlist around a little bit, so I don't think that's even supposed to be what's next. Because I wanted to tell you quickly about this instead. And since we only got about 15 minutes, this should be perfect. So what we're going to learn about now is vertical composting. This is one of the most highly productive techniques that one can use if you have very limited space. Say like this picture illustrates here. If you live in a city and maybe your only outdoor space that you have access to is just a balcony or a patio or some other small space, you can still grow a hell of a lot of food by utilizing that vertical space, by maximizing the edge, by valuing the marginal and maximizing the edge. So, yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about it beforehand. Let's just get right into it. This is a really cool thing. And I think there's a whole ton of potential to modify this system to make it even more sustainable, even more earth friendly, and yeah, just better in every way. Maybe even less expensive, but we'll see.
We have designed a vertical 50 plant container gardening system that uses your kitchen scraps to create its own organic fertilizer. It can grow food right on your deck or patio and grow significantly faster than conventional gardening because it provides the plant roots steady access to nutrient-dense water. Anywhere there's sun or artificial grow lights, you can have a garden. The tower arrives fully assembled. You fill it with quality potting soil like a regular gardening container. Then place seeds or starter plants on top and in each of the 45 holes around its periphery. This means you can grow 50 plants vertically from a single tower in a very small area like your balcony, patio, sidewalk, rooftop, or greenhouse. The tower's height enables gardeners to stand up or sit, which means the towers are perfect for seniors and those with physical limitations. The user gradually fills the center tube with kitchen scraps, adding worms to accelerate the process. As the worms break down the compost, they produce vermicompost or worm castings, a very high-quality organic fertilizer and soil conditioner. The worms' digestive enzymes also distribute beneficial microbes.
Just going to break in quickly because there's a lot of stuff contained within this relatively simple system that probably needs a little bit of extra explanation. What this is basically is, imagine a barrel. It could be a rain barrel. It could be a wine barrel. I've made these wine barrels before. Yeah, sure. I'll post the link to this. 1 second. Let me get that for you. Okay, let me open the chat again. So this is called the Garden Tower 2. This is basically a commercial, but their product is really cool. Oh my god, terrible at spelling tonight. So I don't have a lot of problems promoting them, even though this is basically their commercial for their product. And at the very least, I think there's a lot that we can do with this going forward to make it even better. Why did not post to Twitch? That's annoying. That's really annoying. Let me see if I can post it directly into Twitch. There we go. Oh, is my stream circling for some reason? Oh, maybe I gotta refresh here. There we go. Okay. Oops. Oh, shoot. Didn't mean to do that. Let me get that back quick. Okay. Sorry about that. Hit the wrong button there. So, imagine a barrel. Probably a wine barrel is the easiest way to think of this in your mind. So you have a lot of it's sitting on its end. So it's like how they have it at fancy pubs or wine bars or whatever. You have barrels sitting on its end. So the round part is the facing the vertical. This is made out of plastic, but it's a similar sort of thing. So within that barrel, there's a column, a small column, probably about, that big around, that goes all the way down the middle of it, to the bottom where there's a collection bin. And the idea is you fill all around that column. So not you don't fill the column in, but all the barrel that's not that column, you fill up with compost. And then there are holes on the sides where you can plug plants into. So instead of planting directly downward into the dirt, they're going sideways into the face of the barrel. A lot of vegetables can grow this way, actually. You can do tomatoes, you can do beans, you can do squash, you can do flowers, you can do any number of common garden vegetables, pretty much anything you can think of. You can put into these little slots, and they have like 50 of them that are all around the barrel. The barrel also is on a swivel, so you can rotate it around, face different part of it to the sun every day. Now, remember that central column we were talking about? That's what they're talking about right now. You put your compost in there. So it's got a cap on the top to keep vermin out and stuff like that. You take the cap off, you put your compost in there, or your food waste, not even your compost, your compostables, I should say. Anything from banana peels to coffee grounds to maybe sometimes a little bit of citrus. Worms don't tend to like that as much. You can put even things like yard clippings once in a while, or pieces of paper. Worms actually like paper a lot. Shredded paper is great for them, and they'll make a nice habitat out of it. So within that column, as they said, there's a whole bunch, hundreds and hundreds of holes, just big enough for a worm to squeeze through. So then you put your composting worms in there, and those composting worms will eat the compost, and then they'll move out into the soil column. And so back and forth between that center column for the compost and the dirt that surrounds that center column. That will aerate things, that will create passages for water to move through, and at the same time, they will produce what's known as worm castings. Now, castings are some of the most bioactive, nutritious fertilizer you can get. Worm poop is really great for the soil. It's got tons of beneficial bacteria and fungi and all sorts of things that really help activate and enliven the soil. So they're fertilizing at the same time as they're aerating and creating channels for water to get to all of those plants that are on the outside face of the barrel. And then as it rains, the rain comes and filters through. All of the finished compost at the bottom and all of the rainwater that's gone through all of that stuff and picked up some nutrients along the way comes out into a collection bin at the bottom, which we'll get to in just a second here. That is a really high quality product known as compost tea, with a little bit of worm tea mixed into it too, because you can take those worm castings, dilute it in water, just like you would with like a tea bag or whatever, and then all that beneficial bacteria and other living organisms filters out into the water, and you can spray it on stuff. It can be a foliar feeding method. It's like liquid fertilizer you can put right onto the plants themselves. I've used it a lot. I used to have a compost bin that was set up over just underneath the eaves. So the rain would come off the roof down into the compost bin, and I collect the water at the bottom. That stuff really did well for my garden. And you can do this in the system too. You can send that water back through the system. You can use it to water other plants and help enliven the soil there too. Tons of things you can do with this compost tea. It's really great stuff. And so all of this is happening within basically just a 4 square foot space on your patio. You're having, oh, sorry about that, Natalie. You're having 50 or more plants. So you have 50 holes around in this particular model. You have the top surface that you can grow more plants into from the top, things like maybe carrots or even potatoes, stuff that doesn't do as well being just plugged into a hole. You can grow that stuff on top. You're creating all of this food potential in a very, very small space, square footage wise. So that's why it's perfect for really small spaces that you can tend to a lot because it takes more tending than your average garden bed. One of the drawbacks of any sort of container gardening is that it tends to take more water. It dries out more quickly. There's more surface area, especially in something like this with actual holes, where moisture can flow out to the outside. It's going to dry out more quickly than if you just have your typical garden bed, right? So it does take more maintenance, but because you're living in a small space anyway, it's not like you have to trek across a field and go gather water at the well and all these different steps just to maintain it. It's pretty easy to maintain and maintain easily in your small space. So those are the basic ideas so far. Let's continue on.
To help create a living soil environment for healthy plant growth. The center composting tube contains 28 small holes running down its length. These allow the worms to travel back and forth through the entire structure. The continuous movement of worms through the composting tube and around the tower distributes healthy worm manure that creates channels for steady aeration throughout the soil. Through this process, the soil is renewed continuously. The gardener waters the plants in the traditional way by pouring it on top. Some of the water seeps through the 28 holes in the compost tube and filters through the vermicompost. The remaining water filters through the potting soil and eventually reaches each level of plants. As gravity carries water through the system, excess water drains out and is collected by a small container placed beneath the tower. This water contains leached nutrients from the soil and enriched compost tea from the active vermiculture, which can then be poured back on top to fertilize the plants. The tower's design also drastically reduces evaporation and ensures that the plant roots have steady access to nutrient-dense water. So here's the result. The continuous generation of nutrients, along with stable hydration, creates the ideal environment for rapid plant growth. For areas of water scarcity especially, this is a dramatic breakthrough. Food experts are increasingly warning that the world is entering the beginning stages of a global and long-term food crisis. Hundreds of millions of people around the world, including millions of Americans, will feel the pressure to begin to grow their own food for the first time. The question is how? Traditional gardening is labor-intensive and difficult for seniors, typically requiring soil preparation, tilling, and weeding. Due to restricted availability of water and nutrients, food grows at a conventional pace, and significant water may be required due to evaporation and drainage into the earth beneath plant roots. Thanks to its innovative, efficient design and ease of use, the garden tower is a breakthrough gardening solution for millions of people who want, need, or may soon have to grow a portion of their own food. Our garden tower has been rigorously tested by ourselves, by members of our community, as well as by several master gardeners. And now we have come up with the next generation model that's easier to use, rotatable, more attractive, cheaper to make, and most importantly, can be made in mass quantities, thereby reaching many more people than with our first generation model. Currently, each garden tower is made by hand. Each opening in the barrel must be cut by hand, heated, and formed individually. This process is very time-consuming and inefficient. Our second generation model eliminates all these problems, but tooling alone for this type of manufacturing is about $225,000. Once we cover the cost of the tooling, then each model can be made efficiently, quickly, affordably, and locally. We can then sell each unit for around $200. And after that, the sky's the limit. With your help, we can move toward a sustainable world and food security for everyone.
Was muted there for a second. Okay, so that's the basics of the garden tower too. Now, because this is commercial, of course they're going to gloss over certain things. They're talking about fixing world food security. Everyone in the world could have one of these things. It wouldn't be enough. Let me make myself a little bit bigger here. There we go. If everyone had one of these things, it's not going to be enough to end food security. In fact, food security could be ended now if we just distributed food to people that needed it. That's literally all it would take, because we produce way more food than we need. We've talked about this on many streams before. Yeah, they probably have a patent on this, but here's the thing. There's certain things that they can't really patent. They may be able to patent the way that they put this together, the way they make their plastic blow molds. Because the way this thing comes, because I've looked into buying one for myself. I live in an apartment. I don't have a lot of space. I would love to have something like this. But basically, it's a series of containers. You have the base. You stack the next one on the next on top of the base. You fill that with soil. You move to the next piece. You fill it with soil, so on and so forth. So yeah, they may have patents on that particular design, but already there's plenty of other containers that perform the same function. And in fact, I have built one of these containers without using nearly as much plastic, because that's another drawback that they don't really talk about, and that's plastic. You're reliant on petroleum products to make plastic. There are corn and soy plastic, but it's of, not necessarily of as much utility for this application. If you want something that's durable and really long lasting, I think the way to go is to use a wine barrel. And the reason for that is, you may not be aware, but the way that wine barrels are constructed, it's to be continuously wet on the inside, which, should make sense. They're being filled with wine. The reason that they don't spring a leak, though, is because of the way that each little rib, basically you have a bunch of ribs that you set in a circle inside of the iron hoops. Like, you ever seen one of those old-timey Looney Tunes commercials where, like, someone smashes a barrel, it turns into a bunch of wooden pieces, long, skinny wooden pieces, and some iron hoops that hold everything together, right? All those iron pieces do is hold everything together. They act kind of like the keystone in a stone archway. Because what happens is, there are the wooden staves, the vertical pieces that compose the outside of the wine barrel. There's no nails that go into them. You don't nail together a wine barrel. You fill it with liquid, and the wood expands. And because they're shaped as basically trapezoids, so they have smaller surface area on the inside than the outside surface, as they expand with moisture, they lock together and form a watertight seal. There's no need for any sort of glues or solvents, or not solvents, but sealant. There's no need for nails or anything to keep those pieces pressed together, which is good. That means you don't have any risk of contamination of your food system from nasty glues or sealants of any kind, or waterproof or anything like that. That's the other part of it. Because they want wine to be very pure and have as few contaminants as possible, it's just oak usually. I think that's the primary wood that's used for wine barrels, is just oak. No staining, sealing, or dyeing done to it. Just left natural. Naturally expands, forms a watertight seal. So you don't run the risk of even contaminating your food with plastic. Plastic has become a huge problem in food systems. Microplastics have become huge problems in food systems. I would assume, Natalie, that it is BPA free, their particular barrels, but I don't know for sure. And just because you get rid of one, what is the full name of BPA? But there's like a BPA, you know, or BHP, you said. Oh, I don't know about BHP. I was thinking more BPA, but there's like a BPA, but then there's like a different, slightly different version of BPA that doesn't get included in that. No matter what you do with any plastic, the rule of thumb is it will leach chemicals for the duration of its lifetime. So something's going to leak into that water, and it may be not enough to really harm you. Hopefully that's the case, especially if it's meant to be food grade that is in contact with your food. But you never know. They thought Teflon was safe, and now it's been found that Teflon can cause certain cancers if you use it enough. And because of the heating that goes along with like frying pans, Teflon's not so great for you. Any number of plastics they could find the same thing about. They're unlikely to find that out about just regular oak, though. We have been living with oak trees for as long as there's been humans. It's likely that there's nothing unique to the oak's chemical composition that's going to harm us in any way, right? BPS? I don't know. BPA. Yeah, there we go. BPA. Yeah, that's the thing. They'll eliminate one BPA, but then there's a slightly different chemical that could potentially have the same sort of, neurotoxin effects as BPA that's not regulated. It's kind of a game of whack-a-mole when it comes to plastics. So, more than that, though, you're reliant on petroleum chemicals, and those aren't a guarantee forever, right? We are burning through something like 30,000 years worth of built up hydrocarbons every single year. It takes a long time for oil and gas and coal to form. It doesn't usually happen very quickly. Um, oh boy, I see what's happening there, Natalie. It is censoring words that I've told it to censor in the middle of words. So sorry about that. Yeah, documentary on Teflon, scary stuff. I'm gonna have to fiddle around with the the moderation, the auto modding for those words. That's kind of funny. Anyway, getting back to the thing at hand. So we're burning through fossil fuels faster than they're being produced. Like unless we find some way to speed up the entire process and generate our own fossil fuels or our own analogs to uh, coal, oil, and gas, at some point in human civilization, we're going to get to the point where they become more scarce and it becomes more and more expensive from that point on. Commonly called peak oil. It hasn't happened yet because they've managed to you know, uh, get to energy they couldn't otherwise source through things like fracking and um, like the tar sands mining. That used to be considered oil that was not worth the effort because you get a very small energy return on energy invested. But thanks to the market now, it's become more desirable. And there's a ton of tar sands out there. But that's beside the point. At some point, we're going to have to wean ourselves from fossil fuels. If for no other reason than it's destroying the planet's habitability. We are raising sea levels with all of our fossil fuel burning. Um, we are increasing the intensity of storms and droughts and floods and wildfires. It's not good. So it doesn't really matter which disaster catches up with us faster. At some point, humans are going to have to stop using plastics. So why not start now? Especially when we have a ready supply of used wine barrels across the country that otherwise either get recycled or not recycled, but they might get repurposed into like furniture or planters or rain barrels or something like that. But for the most part, they're going to waste. Let's use that waste product. Remember, there's no such thing as waste in permaculture. Everything's waste can be another thing's valuable fuel source or feed source or whatever. So there's plenty of rain barrels or plenty of wine barrels out there right now that we can do the same sort of thing with. Um, Now here's the drawback with that. Wine barrels tend to go for pretty high prices. If you get them at like a hoity-toity type of garden center, I've seen them for as high as $200 or $300. Although, important to mention, I believe the Garden Tower 2, let's see what it's selling for right now. We'll just check Amazon, why not? Or we'll just see what the first result is. There we go. Let's find out. Garden Tower 2, that product we just saw, currently selling for $400. So even if you got a really, oh, this is a super fancy wine barrel coming from the Napa Valley region or, la-di-da-di-da, you're still probably going to end up spending half the price that you would on a garden tower. Once you have your rain barrel, all you got to do is drill holes in the side. And you got to be a little more strategic about it because you don't want to compromise the entire structural integrity. You're dealing with heavier material when it's wood than versus plastic. So you got to be a little more strategic, but you can still get quite a number of holes in it. I wonder if I could even find a picture. I could probably find a picture of the one that I did. Let's see. Let's add a source. Oh, no, that's not going to be easy. Doesn't matter. All you got to do then is drill holes in it. And it's got to be basically, 2-inch holes, spaced widely enough that they're not going to make the entire barrel fall apart. And then you just do the same sort of thing. The hardest part to replicate, though, is that central column with the holes in it. I haven't figured out a way to do that without plastic yet. Potentially, you could take a really thick piece of bamboo and somehow figure out how to carve out the joints, because you've seen bamboo before. It goes out into joints, and those joints are generally sealed chambers, so the water doesn't go, or whatever material doesn't go straight through them. If you were to take a piece of bamboo and somehow carve out all the way through to the other end, hey, maybe that could be your central column. Bamboo also is very water and rot resistant. It doesn't break down under waterlogged conditions very well. It's naturally antimicrobial. It's naturally rot resistant. So those can be good things. And then all you gotta do is same thing, drill holes in it. Then you have your central compost column. And if you put those two parts together and put it up on a stand, then it's just a matter of finding something to collect the water with. That could be anything. It could be, a stainless steel stock pot. If you're going with metal pots in general, it's better to go with stainless steel. I guess that's really the gold standard, so to speak, when dealing with food and living things. Because if you went with, say, a copper pot, copper has the tendency to kill certain organisms, and you don't want to risk really destroying that delicate web of life in your soil. But if you can find just a stainless steel copper stock pot, and again, the same thing with aluminum. Aluminum is pretty good. Still, I think it can have some interactions with certain living things. The most inert one type of metal you can find is going to be stainless steel. So all you got to do is put a stock pot under there instead of their little collection thing. And then you can have all the same benefits as what you just saw. The one last thing to replicate would be having it easy to rotate around. But if you could find some sort of, say like you found legs from a sturdy dresser, and you put those onto, attach them to the bottom of your barrel, your wine barrel, and they were supporting it. Then you could, say, put wheels on the bottom of those, and then you could rotate it around just as well. There's ways to get around all of this stuff. There's ways to do things cheaper, and potentially more efficiently than what they're trying to sell you. And at the same time, have something that is going to last longer, because that's the other problem with plastic is that if it's exposed to the sun, especially, it may not biodegrade, but it's going to photodegrade. Um, Perhaps when you're little, you had like a little Tykes slide, or car, one of those cars that you like Flintstones around on it, something like that. And maybe after a few seasons, the plastic started getting soft, it started getting discolored, and it started cracking. That's photo degradation. That's just light damage, and you can mitigate that somewhat by having your plastic be black, but it's never going to be 100%. Wine barrels are almost certainly going to outlast any sort of plastic barrel that's going to be exposed to the elements. I can almost guarantee that. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can find a picture of the barrel that I did. I think I have an album of it on my personal Facebook page. I'm going to see if I can pull it up real quick. And if not, no big deal. We'll just keep moving on then. Yeah, I'm not seeing it real quick. I'll save that for another time then. Anyway. Yeah, that's right now. I don't know why it's modding words in the middle of sentences, but whatever. I have to fiddle around with that word filter a little bit more, as it's a little bit hypersensitive right now. So yeah, huh? That's weird. Anyway, no problem. So, and that's the thing about permaculture is if we're thinking about long-term sustainability, if we're thinking about doing things for lower costs, made and doing things with more readily available materials, we can come up with some solutions that are, multiple dimensions of better, you know? Yeah. Plastic doesn't age well in the sun. That's true. That's just a universal. Neither do you. And again, the over vigilant word moderation has caught whatever the last word was there. Sorry about that, Natalie. But yeah, food towers are still a pretty cool concept because combining it's what's known in permaculture as stacking functions. So instead of just having your one little, even a raised bed where you plant everything on the surface and that's all you really care about, you're adding to that a worm composting system. You're adding to that a collection system where you can collect super nutrient rich and bioactive water from the system. You're adding to that just the greater use of the edge effect. You're using not just the surface, but the sides of it as well. And there's other ways you could do this as well. You could just take 4 pallets and nail them all together in a square. You could even do a triangle if you want, if you don't have quite as much space. Pallets tend to be, about 4 feet by 4 feet. So that's about the same size here. And then all you'd have to do is um, kind of there's a way you can put like a strip of wood underneath each slat, right? Yeah, Twitch sure is sensitive. I don't know why it keeps deleting stuff. Sorry. Um, there's a way you can do it with the pallets where, you know how a pallet it has a slat of wood and then a gap and then a slat of wood and then a gap. If you nail a strip underneath each slat of wood, it creates that same sort of thing. So it's another shelf to grow on the sides. So you're using that vertical space again. You can put all your compost in there as well. and have a worm tower as well. It wouldn't be as easy to collect any water that leaches from it, but it's still a way that you could maximize your space, having just a small area to grow in. Plenty of ways to do this. You don't have to go by, their example just because it's well produced and eye catching and like kind of whiz bang about everything. There's always a better way to do stuff, or a more permaculture way, I guess, even to do stuff to produce less waste, to maximize more edge. Yeah, it's good stuff. But I just think it's a really cool concept because it combines so many functions all together in a very small space. And most permaculture solutions are not oriented towards the city because they tend to view like the single family homestead as kind of the baseline mode of thinking, I guess. It's the base unit. I guess that's a better way to put it. The base unit for doing permaculture design. So the countryside is thought of more for permaculture. Urban gets a little bit short shrift, but I think we can change that. And think right now, think about the largest major city that you live nearby or live in. Think about all of the space that's taken up by people's patios, people's balconies, rooftops. There's tons of unused land that could be growing at least a portion of our food. And I think that's the key. They have some grandiose promises about feeding the entire world. You couldn't live off one of these things. One person would requires more food than can be generated by a single garden tower. There's just no two ways about it. Not to mention, you're not really growing, nuts or large fruits, or you're not integrating animals with it in any way. So it's good for, fruits and vegetables and greens, but that's more or less its limitation. That's as far as it can go. So you're going to need to supplement it with a little bit more. But it can do something, and we can take up a lot of land that's basically wasteland right now, as I said, in the forms of rooftops, patios, balconies, all that sort of thing, and we can generate more food hyper locally. And if enough of us did that, that would make an impact. Again, let's not overpromise. That's never going to bring us across the finish line in terms of complete food security. But it could be the difference between someone not being able to afford fresh produce and having fresh produce in their life. It could be the difference between destroying another 100,000 acres of rainforest to make way for agricultural space and not doing that, not needing to do that sort of thing. There's a significant amount of land in America right now that's taken up just by lawns. It is the number one, in terms of acreage, irrigated crop in America. The number one. It contains more acres than any other plant does alone. More than corn, more than soy, more than any other single crop. Lawns, that's our number one crop. Think about converting a fraction of those lawns into productive space that can grow us food, that can grow us beautiful things, more flowers, which helps more pollinators, which not only enriches our experience with nature, but helps everything, has huge cascading effects. But more than that, reduces the pressure on the hinterlands, the marginal lands that could be farmland if you really needed it to be, but it would take a lot of inputs. That could be grazed land if you really wanted to strip the land bare, but you might only get a few rotations out of it before it gives out. It eases the pressure off of all those delicate lands, all those lands that we want to keep intact. The more food we grow for ourselves does that. So that's the main point. And I've gone well over my time tonight, so I'm going to have to wrap things up. If you like the stream, please give a follow. You can follow me on my link tree. I'll put up my link tree right now. This is oh, come on. There's my link tree. Pretty simple. linktr.ee/bread_theory. You can find links to my YouTube archives where I archive all of my videos. You can find links to, Twitch, Twitter, any place on social media that I have a presence, you'll find a link there for, as well as links to help support the stream monetarily. It's always appreciated. I'll give this away for free regardless, but it always does. It always is very much appreciated to see people showing support too, any way that you can. And if you can't donate monetarily, no problem. You can still help the stream by sharing it with someone who might be just getting into permaculture in this case, or just getting into leftist ideas if you're going to join me for one of my Wednesday streams when I talk about politics. Right now we are going through the ABC of Anarchism, also known as What is Communist Anarchism by Alexander Berkman, a really introductory text on some of the ideas behind anarchism as a political philosophy. Doing that every Wednesday night at around 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then the weekend, and my Sunday stream more loose. Sometimes I do permaculture, sometimes I do new urbanism, sometimes I do whatever just catches my fancy. I think coming up pretty soon, I'll probably do another stream where I just pick community requested videos. If you go to the Discord, that is the best way to make sure that I see the videos that you'd like to suggest. There's a whole section there to request videos to be shown on stream that we can go through and learn together about. But yeah, I think that's all I have for you tonight. So hopefully I'll see you all Wednesday. Same place, roughly the same time. Oh, sorry you're having such troubles tonight, Natalie. I hope you can get your technical difficulties figured out. For those of you joining me on Twitch, we're going to raid into someone now. So if you have a suggestion for who that should be, now's the time to shout it out. Otherwise, I'll just pick someone and we'll go from there. Let's see. Who do we got tonight? Fundraiser. Maybe. Looks like Tina 2 is doing a fundraiser, so that might be a good one to raid into. But anyway, any other suggestions? Let's see if anyone's... Nope, no one said anything yet. So seeing nothing else, we'll probably just go with Tina 2 tonight. Not sure if I've ever raided to this particular streamer, but I do like their content. Yep, they do a lot of leftist stuff. And right now they're doing a charity stream for sickle cell. So, worthy cause. For those of you who are finding this from some other avenue than Twitch, if you want another cool streamer to follow, if you want to get into the Twitch side of things, meet some cool streamers, here's the link for that. Excuse me. Otherwise, we're going to start the raid. Thank you all for joining me, and hope to see you Wednesday.